What's up, AVS pros? Welcome to another Tech Talk topic. And this one's near and dear to my heart, and I know Zach's heart too, because we actually used to work for a storage company. So, special guest today, Zach. Do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Zach Zeilinger. So I've been with VMware for about 2 years now. Was previously a VMware cloud or a VMC on AWS cloud solutions architect, kind of like Matt for AVS, but for AWS. Now I'm currently a core solutions architect down here in Southern California.
Very cool. And that's this is such a great topic to have you on too, because our storage background. It's funny how we just can never shake the storage stuff. Like it applies so
Yeah.
much, even more in these multi-cloud or cloud offerings that VMware has. So great to have you on, and excited to have you. And why is Pac-Man eating away at our storage capacity? So one of the biggest reasons that I would call out is storage policy selection. And this is what's really unique, because Zach, you had a different experience covering VMC. I never covered the product. VMC treated storage policy selection a little bit different than AVS, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So in VMC, our default storage policies for vSAN were actually automated, right? So depending on the number of nodes customers would have in their clusters, you could think of it as elastic, right? That plan would change to help customers utilize their available storage better.
Yeah. And it's different in AVS because AVS starts, whenever you deploy AVS, you get that 3 node cluster. So there's only one storage policy you can choose, which is that RAID 1 FTT1 mirroring, right? So basically, and we've got some other videos on this topic on the channel. So feel free to check that out if you want to dive deeper into it. But the highest level, it's basically like a RAID 1 or a RAID 10. So every 100 gigs of VMDK takes up 200 gigs of raw capacity. And what you should really be focusing on as you move on and grow your cluster is you need to move those storage policies to erasure coding. Maybe you could touch on that on a high level, what erasure coding is, Zach.
Yeah, so erasure coding in vSAN is essentially we take the technology, node-based technology, we call it RAIN. I think, Matt, you've explained this on your channel before, but you can think of each node in the cluster like a disk in a RAID, right? So we're going to be able to stripe that data across the nodes, and therefore that kind of 100 gig example that you gave us, Matt, we're going to take that 100 gigs, and instead of mirroring that so it consumes 200, we're going to stripe that data across each node in the cluster, of course, giving you a parity bit somewhere. So that your VMDKs and that 100 gig VMDK is not taking up as much space as a mirrored policy would.
Yeah. And so I've had a couple calls even within the last week I can think of is, they're usually project status calls. And one customer I remember going, I just set up this new bulk migration project and we're gonna have to add nodes. And I immediately was thinking, what bucket are we filling up? And of course it was storage. And so I asked, what storage policy are they on? And they just kind of looked at me with blank faces. And I was like, okay, that's what we need to change. And
Yeah.
for them, they were up to 10 nodes, so like they could do RAID 6 or FTT2 erasure coding. And that's not only is that guaranteed 25% space savings, because again, it's 200% for FTT1 mirroring. RAID 6 is like a 1.5x, so still 25% savings, but you're also adding additional availability in that cluster, because now we can handle 2 simultaneous nodes failing at the same
Right.
time. So easy, very understandable why customers would forget about it and not know, or even not know about it, especially if you haven't worked with vSAN before. You're already adopting
Very
something
true.
in the cloud, comes with its own networking nuances. There's a whole lot of stuff that you're taking. Old adage of drinking from the fire hose is happening. So 2 things I wanted to show real quick on if this, if you say that's definitely my problem, I didn't change the storage policy, where do I do it? I wanted to just show where that would be. So this is, the Azure portal. We're under an AVS private cloud instance right here. Actually, just so you can see it from sort of beginning to finish, let's go find our AVS instance. Here's West US. So this is our AVS private cloud. And there's these things called run commands, which basically you have a cloud admin role. These run scripting in the background to do elevated privileges changes. So you can't change certain aspects of storage policies in the vSphere UI in AVS. So you have to come here to make that happen. So you'll want to change and focus on two run commands. One, you'll want to do set cluster default storage policy. So this makes sure and that, if this is something that you have identified, you want to do this first because it makes no change on any of your VMs in your cluster. The only thing that this changes is anything new coming to that vSAN data store will guarantee that it's on the storage policy that you dictated in the default storage policy. The default storage policy at the get-go is going to be that FTT1 mirroring. If you're more than 6 nodes, then you want to go ahead and change that to RAID 6. And what you put into the storage policy name has to be identical because it is, capital sensitive. If you go find your storage policies under policies and profiles, you can go to VM storage policies and say you want to do RAID 6. It's right here. You can check this box and make sure that you copy and paste so it doesn't, so you don't happen to fat finger an extra space or whatever the case is. You plug that in. You give the cluster name, cluster 1, for example, and you click run. Now the default storage policy is that new storage policy and anything new going to it. To go change existing VMs, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can go basically into the settings of the VM and change the VMDKs, or you can come here into the run commands and there's set VM storage policy. And this will allow you to change each VM independently. There will be a resyncing process that has to happen. You can monitor that under the cluster level view. If you go into vCenter, go into monitor, scroll down to the vSAN section, and go to resyncing objects, and it'll show you how many objects have been affected by this change that you did in the run command and how much time will be left over. So something Zach and I have been very familiar with from our VxRail days.
Yes, yeah.
Changing storage policies. So, popping back over to our PowerPoint. The next one's going to be, what kind of storage are you putting in AVS in the first place? We know it's going to be VM-based storage, but, Zach, do you want to put file storage on vSAN?
No, that would get expensive and consume a lot of nice storage.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you're buying arguably the fastest storage in Azure. I say arguably, there's some definitely higher tiers, but this is all NVMe, end-to-end, all flash storage. So absolutely, there's a couple of nice native options within Azure, which is really nice because with AVS, and this is true for VMC, it's not like a and, it's or not an or, it's an and when it comes to cloud services. And one of my favorite ones that we talked about with customers is you got Azure Files, which uses blob storage on lower tier storage for files, but you can also use file sync, which you install on a file server, and that allows you to just make your file server VM a cache drive. So instead of having like a 60 terabyte VMDK, you could shuffle that down to 10 terabytes, and 10 terabytes of hot file storage will stay on that VM, but the rest gets shuffled off into blob storage, therefore reducing the footprint of that VM and freeing up space on the all-flash vSAN data store. Which is awesome. And then I don't know, Zach, in multi-cloud offerings, backup is always a big question. What do your customers do for backup?
Yeah, so backups are definitely something customers have to think about, when either augmenting a data center or just completely replacing their data centers with something like AVS or VMC on AWS. And a lot of the backup vendors now will use something like blob storage, S3 compatible storage. AWS has their Glacier storage now that a lot of different backup vendors will utilize. And that our backups are not something that we need on high performance NVMe SSDs, right? We want to put that on something that's cheap and deep. And so a lot of them will do like a VTL or virtual tape library out to something like blob storage or object-based storage.
Yeah, and it's funny, again, kind of going back to our Dell EMC days, the same concepts really apply. Like, you didn't put backups on VxRail or vSAN, or even like primary
Right.
SANs, you put them on like data domains or some other, cheap and deep is definitely itching at that, the history of on-prem infrastructure. So
Tape
it's funny.
libraries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of other options when it comes to augmented storage, and we've mentioned this a couple of times. This is a little bit outside of just, what can I, best use my vSAN storage for. This gets into, there are augmented storage solutions. NetApp Files is one of them, and Cloud Block Store. Those are both GA options for AVS, and those are actual vSphere data stores. They're not just something guest OSs can consume as storage, but actual VMFS data stores over iSCSI. And then one that's in public preview is eSAN, and that's also out there as like another VMFS based data store. So if you've come through kind of like these high level topics, I've looked at my storage policy configuration, it does match what it needs to be. I'm making sure file storage is the right place and the backup storage is in the right place. Then you can start looking at these third party offerings of making sure that you can grow your storage need without having to grow your node count, and that's ultimately the end goal, and can really help better the total cost of ownership for this product. So Zach, thanks for jumping on today. I think that's pretty much all I had. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. So it's
Nice.
good being here.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks everybody.